lot of things are happening in Springfield. Just last week, Governor Pritzker gave his budget proposal, and today to talk to us about that is State Senator Dave Koehler out of Peoria. Thank you so much for giving us this time today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I want to start there. I want to start with the budget proposal. You sent out a release last week that said that it shows, paraphrasing, the promise of getting the budget back to where it needs to be.
Right.
Why do you believe that?
Well, because I think we have to look at all the different things that impact the budget and recognize that and build a plan around it. And he's done that. I mean, first of all, we're $3 billion in debt. So you have to take that into consideration. We also have to take into consideration that so much of our revenue right now goes out for our pension payments. And people don't quite understand why the pension payments are so high right now. Back in the 90s, Governor Edgar and the legislature said they were going to reform the whole pension system, and they said we're going to have 15 years of relatively flat payments, and then if the market and all the rest doesn't keep up, then we're going to have a ramp up. Well, that's where we've been for the last 5 years, and they anticipated that this year we would have probably maybe $4.5 billion towards the pension system. We actually have over $9 billion. So we can't sustain that. A pension system is a long-term, investment. So we need to refigure that. Just like buying a house. The balloon payment comes. You don't go, put yourself out on the street. What you do is you refinance and you make some logical decisions about it. That's what he's trying to do. Because we can't, expect to have our higher education institutions or social services hurt anymore. And in fact, I was very happy to see that he was trying to prioritize giving them some increases.
In talking about pension, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a part of how he hopes to address that includes using what he's calling the fair income tax to kind of ameliorate some of those expenses, cut down on some of those as well. People call it progressive income tax.
Right.
That's something obviously that isn't legal yet within the state of Illinois. And there are a few other things that he's kind of built upon within this budget proposal that aren't legalized yet, taxing marijuana, taxing sports betting.
Right.
Do you think that that's a good approach to, in a way, bet on things that first have to be voted through that really
Well, in this budget proposal, he couldn't include those things as revenue, because the law says that you have to use what's in law right now to give a balanced budget proposal to the legislature. So the other things are things that he wants to do this spring. He wants to make adult use cannabis legal. He wants to do sports betting. I have some concerns about both of those, but I think I would probably vote for them. On the cannabis side, he made a very good point saying that, look, folks, it's out there. Anybody can leave this room right now and go out and buy marijuana on the street. So we need to, number one, decriminalize it. Number two, we need to have, if it's being used and sold out there, let's control it, let's regulate it. Let's make sure that it's not getting down to, the high school and grade school level. That's hard to do. I understand that. But let's regulate it and let's tax it. Sports betting is happening all across the country with a Supreme Court decision that made it so that states could do this legally. We're kind of late in that game. Other states around us are looking at that. So is it going to be a panacea? No, neither of these. I mean, I don't think you can say that this is going to solve the state's budget problems. It's not. It is a little extra revenue. In terms of the progressive income tax, that's something that the legislature has to agree to put on the ballot for 2020 for the fall election. And the voters will decide that. And so if the voters decide to go with a progressive tax like Wisconsin and Iowa have, then fine. I would guess that if we're smart, what we'll do is we'll come in, if we get the progressive income tax, we'll come in just a little bit under what Wisconsin and Iowa has, so that we don't have that argument about, well, you're taxing yourself. Well, Iowa and Wisconsin already have tax rates that are up over 8%.
Do you think these things will actually pass through? We're talking about marijuana, then taxing it, sports betting, then
I think those will
taxing
probably
it, and
happen.
the constitutional amendment. Do you think those things will, across the board,
I think there's a good chance that those are passed this year.
Which ones would pass this year?
Well, all of them. But for the legislature to pass the progressive tax, all it means is that we're going to put it on the ballot.
Yeah.
We don't decide that. The voters of Illinois decide that.
All right. Let's kind of switch gears a little bit. Capital bill.
That's huge.
Where are your thoughts here?
Well, see, I was in the legislature 10 years ago when we, in 2009, said we are not going to wait 10 years to do this again. And by golly, here we are 10 years later, and we didn't do anything in the meantime. All anybody has to do is drive on the roads and to look at the conditions to understand that we have to put money into roads and bridges. I just was on a committee hearing last week. We heard that one of the bridges over I-55 going towards Chicago is at a level 2 out of 10, which means it's in critical condition. You know, let's not wait any longer. I think that we have to get on a capital bill right now. It needs to be big. You know, last time it was $31 billion. We're probably looking at more this time. But if we don't fix our infrastructure, which the state is the only one responsible for that, then shame on us, because our infrastructure is crumbling, and the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets.
A lot of people have talked about spending. Obviously, that's going to take money, spending.
Yes.
I had on Jason Barrickman recently last week, and one of the things he was talking about, even within the budget proposal, is not getting into the habit, learning from past mistakes of spending money that we don't necessarily have. That's where we get into conversation about betting on things that haven't been quite legalized yet.
Right.
A lot of people are on two sides of the coin when it comes to the $15 minimum wage that was just passed through without the state. There are people who say now we're banking on people talking about spending, having more money to spend, and then there are others who think that the small business owners and businesses don't have the money to spend to give to the people there. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I voted for the $15 minimum wage increase, but I did it hoping that there would be some compromise when it went to the House, so that we could understand that there's a difference in the economies of downstate Illinois as opposed to Chicago and the suburbs. And that wasn't done. I have had a discussion with the governor since then about looking at if we can't take, there's a tax, they call it a tax credit. It's not really a tax credit, it's a refund of the increase in the payroll. And there's going to be some incentives to give a certain portion of that back to smaller businesses. I think we need to extend that out for probably further than what we've anticipated already, because we can't see this as a negative to our smaller businesses. This is going to be a tough one. Primarily, I believe that people who work full-time should not live in poverty. I would have preferred that we had a little bit longer schedule for implementing this in the downstate communities. That's not to be, but I'm going to try to go back and see if we can't fix some of that.
Do you think this was something that may have been pushed too quickly? I mean, why go through the $15 minimum wage as quick? I mean, it was really rapidly fast within the first, month that the governor's been
I
elected.
don't know what
Do you
his
think there
thinking.
could have been more time?
There probably could have been more time. I don't know what his thinking was on that. He asked the legislature to do this in the time frame that they did, and so the legislature complied. You know, it's one of those issues. When is a good time? It's a tough issue. It's a tough vote.
All right. My last question to you is simply about talking about that pace. It's a very dramatic shift from what we've seen within the previous 4 years or so, just of how quickly something has already gotten done. Obviously, the $15 minimum wage was right smack down the middle of party lines. Where do you see that as maybe a moniker to expect for the next several years here under this current General Assembly? Or
it's hard to say. Last year, we passed a bipartisan budget. It was the first time since 1999. I think it was a true compromise by both Republicans and Democrats. I hope we can get back there at this point. Just because we have supermajorities in both the House and the Senate does not mean that we should just go this alone. Legislation is always better when you have bipartisan support for it. I think we're going to see that in the Capitol bill, because there are not Republican roads and Democrat roads. They're just roads, and we all need our roads fixed in each of our districts. So I think we're going to see a lot of support for that. We'll see how the budget goes. I think it's an austere budget. You know, I hope that it is a bipartisan budget, because that's the way we need to move forward in Illinois.
All right. Well, Senator Dave Koehler, thank you so much as always for joining us.
Thank you, Gene.
All right.